Lucas didn't even wait for me to finish my sentence. His voice cut through the conference room like a blade, sharp enough to slice through the air, sharp enough to stop the sound of my own breath. "You're done. This is your last day. Get out." 80 faces turned toward me. The slide behind me, highlighting a $600 million fraud gap, was still glowing on the massive screen. My hand froze on the laser pointer. I had spent 3 weeks pulling those numbers, digging through late-night files, chasing anomalies no one else wanted to see. And now, the man with perfect hair and a last name that weighed like currency was erasing me with one sentence. Lucas, CEO Grant's son, vice president by inheritance, not merit. He strutted into this company straight from an overpriced MBA program and a life cushioned by privilege. He never built anything, never bled for deadlines. I did, for 11 years. I lived in these glass walls. I came in before sunrise, left when the janitors were vacuuming hallways. I designed the compliance system that kept us alive during 2 federal audits. I held this company together when investors threatened to walk. And yet, here I was, standing in the same room where I'd earned 3 promotions, being treated like a criminal for doing the one thing no one else had the courage to do: tell the truth. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Mom. "House looks perfect. Realtor needs the deposit today." My chest tightened. The home I promised her, the one we dreamed of for years, was slipping through my fingers in real time. Across the table, Grant sat silent, his Rolex catching the fluorescent light. The same man who once called me the backbone of this company couldn't even lift his head to meet my eyes. Lucas smirked, savoring the spectacle, like this was some kind of show. And maybe it was, because when I glanced up, I caught a phone angled toward me, recording. Seconds later, laughter rippled through the company's private channel. A video of me, frozen mid-sentence, with the caption, "Justice served." Humiliation burned hotter than anger. I wanted to speak, to fight, but all I managed was one word, steady and sharp enough to hide the tremor in my hands. Noted. Then I closed my laptop, the slide still screaming proof behind me, and walked out, carrying silence like a weapon they didn't know I had. The city blurred past the windshield like streaks of cold gray, but I didn't see any of it. My phone screen was all I could look at, the playback of my humiliation. Now, living forever on the company's internal feed, someone had uploaded the clip before I even left the building. There I was, frozen mid-sentence, pointing at a slide that screamed $600 million unaccounted for, a number no one wanted to acknowledge. Under the video, the comments were a feeding frenzy. Guess who learned the hard way? Never bite the hand that feeds you? Finally, someone shut her up. Each line carved into me like glass. My name, my reputation, was now a joke for people I mentored, people who once begged me to review their reports at midnight. I scrolled through until the words blurred. Then I hit replay. Again and again. I made myself watch the moment Lucas said it. "You're done. This is your last day. Get out." He looked straight at me when he said it, smirking like this wasn't business. It was personal. Maybe it was. Lucas had hated me since the first time I corrected his numbers in front of the board. He called it disrespect. I called it math. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Rage wasn't a firestorm this time. It was ice in my veins, quiet and patient. They thought they ended me. They didn't even scratch the surface. The car stopped at a red light. My reflection stared back at me in the glass tower of my former office, still glowing against the night. 11 years. 11 years of 14-hour days, canceled weekends, and being the name investors trusted when they didn't trust anyone else. And they erased me in under 60 seconds because I dared to tell the truth. I closed my eyes and inhaled slowly, buried beneath the humiliation. A thought stirred, small, sharp, and familiar. Control doesn't vanish, it hides. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. Realtor says deposit due by 5 tomorrow. We can back out if needed. The future I promised her, the safety we'd dreamed about, was slipping. That ache pressed hard against my ribs. And then, like a flicker through fog, a memory surfaced. Last year, the merger talks, compliance overhaul, the day they shoved a stack of papers across my desk, temporary designation as independent ethics signatory. I'd signed without fanfare, thinking it was just another formality to satisfy the international trust fund investing in us. They needed one name the fund could rely on for unbiased oversight before releasing capital. That name had been mine, and no one ever said it wasn't anymore. My pulse thudded as I swiped through old emails, searching archives I hadn't touched in months. And then I saw it. Subject line glowing like a beacon. Ethics signatory confirmation, effective immediately. The email was still there, dated, stamped, binding, my digital signature attached. I tapped the link, and my breath caught when the system loaded. Status: active. Authority: valid until revoked in writing by Trust Board. It had never been revoked, not once. I leaned back against the leather seat. The hum of traffic, a distant murmur. A slow, cold smile pulled at my lips. They paraded me out like a criminal, thinking I was powerless. But power wasn't always about titles or offices. Sometimes it lived in forgotten clauses and signatures no one bothered to erase. Lucas wanted me gone because I uncovered a $600 million black hole, but the deal he and his father were betting the company's future on, the $1.8 billion mega contract, couldn't move a single inch without my sign-off. Not without me. The red light flipped green. I didn't drive home. I pulled into the next lot, killed the engine, and opened my laptop. My hands no longer trembled. They were steady, deliberate, ready. Control wasn't gone. It had been waiting for me in plain sight. And tonight, I planned to take it back, quietly, surgically, and without mercy. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of my laptop booting up. City lights spilled through the window, painting thin silver lines across the floor. Midnight in Manhattan, where deals were made over whiskey and lives were dismantled over a single email. I sat cross-legged on the couch, coffee gone cold at my side, and opened the company's contract management portal. My credentials still worked. Of course they did. Lucas had fired me in front of half the company, but he'd been too arrogant or too stupid to revoke my access before making his little performance go viral. One click, then another. Pages of documents scrolled past in neat rows until I stopped at the header that mattered. Strategic Investment Agreement. Value: $1.8 billion. The number glowed like a neon sign. Obscene and magnetic. This was the contract they'd been courting for months, the one Grant bragged about in every board call, the one Lucas whispered about like it was his coronation. I opened the file, every nerve in my body taut yet steady. The dashboard displayed its current status in bold letters. Pending ethics signatory approval. Release of funds blocked. My breath didn't hitch. My pulse didn't spike. Not this time. I had expected this, but seeing it in black and white was different. Confirmation has a weight to it, a cold, grounding weight that slides into your bones and stays there. I clicked into the Permissions tab. There it was. Authority holder. My name. Status. Active. Valid. Binding. Uncontested. Without my signature. This entire deal, the press releases, the investor promises, the smoke and mirror projections, was just air. No funds would move. No product would launch. And every day this deal stalled. The market would smell blood. I leaned back, fingers laced behind my head, staring at the ceiling. I could almost hear Lucas's voice from this morning, dripping with triumph. "This is your last day. Get out." He thought I was gone, that I'd crawl away and lick my wounds while he cashed in on Daddy's empire. My cursor hovered over the Financial Disclosure tab, curiosity tugging like a thread I couldn't ignore. One click opened the bonus structure. The numbers hit harder than I expected. Projected performance bonus. Lucas Grant. $12,000 upon successful contract execution. $12 million. For a man who'd never built a thing, who'd spent years mistaking nepotism for competence. For humiliating me in front of the entire company, while the slide behind me screamed the truth he wanted buried. I laughed under my breath, soft, bitter, almost amused. Not because it was funny, but because irony tastes sharp when it cuts this clean. The same contract Lucas needed to crown himself was now the blade resting in my hands. I studied the timeline. Funds scheduled for release in 7 business days. Press embargo lifting in 3. Which meant the clock was ticking, not for me, but for them. Every hour this deal sat frozen was an hour closer to chaos. My mind sketched out the possibilities, sharp and methodical. There was no need for screaming, no grand declaration of war, just silence and strategy. Let them wonder why the trust fund hadn't wired a cent. Let Lucas squirm while investors call, while his carefully scripted future unravels thread by thread. Calculated calm. That's what this was. No rage, no panic, just precision. I closed the bonus file and opened a new document. Typing notes with surgical detachment. Step 1. Confirm authority. Done. Step 2. Freeze status. Active. Step 3. Prepare ethics report draft. Include fraud findings. Ready within 24 hours. My fingers moved like they had a map no one else could read. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was control reclaiming its rightful place in my hands. Across the room. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Another message from Mom. Just one line this time. We'll figure it out. I stared at it, my jaw tightening. Yes, we would. But not by backing out, not this time. I shut the laptop, the glow of the $1.8 billion contract lingering in my mind like an ember refusing to die. Power wasn't in titles or offices, it was in the fine print, the clauses no one bothered to remember, except me. And tonight, I remembered everything. The cursor blinked at me like a heartbeat. Waiting. My draft email was short, surgical in its precision. Subject: Ethics clearance status. Immediate action required body. Pending ethics clearance due to integrity concerns. Contract execution is on hold until further notice. No adjectives, no emotion, just words carrying the weight of a guillotine blade. I read it twice, once for grammar, once for effect. Though effect wasn't something I needed to manufacture. The power lived in the clauses I invoked, in the fine print that Lucas and his father never bothered to memorize because men like them didn't read. They commanded. I clicked send, a soft whoosh, and it was done, like snapping a thread no one thought could break. Seconds later, the first notification lit up my screen. System alert status changed. Disbursement frozen. Ethics approval pending. The $1, $8 billion deal. The one they'd paraded in front of investors like a golden trophy was now in stasis, sealed by 6 words and my authority stamp. For a moment, I just sat there, watching the ripple begin. The quiet satisfaction that spread through me wasn't loud or vengeful. It was measured, almost delicate, like the first sip of a drink you've waited years to taste. Another ping. Then 3 more. My inbox bloomed with frantic subject lines. Urgent. Immediate clarification required. Urgent. Call me now. Freeze notification. Explain this. And then the big one. Flagged priority. CC. Grant CEO. Lucas Grant. Board of Directors. I opened it slowly, savoring the sequence of names. The trust fund's compliance team had copied everyone who mattered. My sentence, 12 words in all, was now threaded across every executive's inbox, lighting up their screens like a flare in the dark. I imagined Lucas at this exact moment, probably still in his tailored arrogance, phone buzzing on a nightstand beside some overpriced bourbon. He'd swipe the screen, expecting praise or updates, and instead find my name like a ghost refusing to die. The thought made me smile. Not wide, not cruel, just enough to feel the corner of my mouth tilt in quiet rebellion. Another ping broke my reverie. But this time, it wasn't an email. It was a message from an unknown number, dropped into a secure chat I didn't recognize. I clicked, and the screen shifted to a thread already alive with tension. Investor Direct Channel, adding my name to the group. She's the key now, below it. A cascade of messages from names I recognized only from quarterly reports. Fund managers, institutional investors, power in human form. What's the real risk exposure? Timeline for clearance? Is there fraud confirmation? The words blurred together into one undeniable reality. I wasn't just back in the game. I was holding the ball, and the entire stadium was staring at me. I typed nothing. Not yet. Silence was leverage, and leverage was currency instead. I scrolled up to reread the line that changed everything. She's the key now. Not Lucas. Not Grant. Me. I minimized the chat and leaned back, letting the room settle into its late-night hush. My laptop screen cast a cool glow, the contract dashboard still frozen on the words that made my pulse steady. Pending ethics approval. I pictured the boardroom chaos this would spark by morning, the whispered calls, the damage control scripts, the hollow reassurances to investors who'd stop believing after the second lie. All because I pressed send. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was a reset, a subtle shift in gravity, tilting the entire axis back toward me without a single raised voice. My phone buzzed again. A different notification this time. A group call request from the investor channel. I declined it with one tap. They could wait. Everyone could wait. Because for the first time since Lucas threw me out of that glass tower, I wasn't the one scrambling for control. I was control. And this was only the beginning. By morning, the storm had already started. I woke to a chorus of pings, news alerts stacking one after another like falling dominoes. The first headline stole my breath. Not because I didn't expect it, but because it happened so fast. Brightwell's $1.8 billion deal hit sudden snag. Ethics approval pending. The words glared from my screen, bold and merciless. And below them, a graph. A jagged red line cutting downward. 8%. That was how much Brightwell stock had dropped in just 2 hours of pre-market trading. 8% before Wall Street even had its first coffee. I sat at my kitchen table, stirring sugar into black coffee, scrolling through the financial feed with surgical detachment. Analysts were already speculating, their language shifting from cautious optimism to something that smelled like blood. Unexpected compliance delay suggests possible governance issues. Investors seek clarification amid rumors of internal fraud. They didn't know the half of it. Not yet. Another notification popped up. A press release from Brightwell's corporate communications team. Signed by none other than Lucas Grant. Our upcoming strategic partnership remains on track. Any suggestion otherwise is based on misinformation. Routine compliance measures are currently underway. I almost laughed. Routine compliance. That's what he called an ethics lockout that froze nearly $2 billion in capital. Lucas was spinning this like a DJ at a rooftop party. But the music wasn't fooling anyone. I pictured him pacing in some glass office, barking orders into a headset, face flushed under expensive lighting. Lucas had always thrived on appearances, on looking like the smartest guy in the room. Now, no amount of PR gloss could hide the cracks spreading across his perfect surface. My phone buzzed again, this time with something different. Unknown number. I hesitated, then swiped. Is this my name? The voice was crisp, professional, carrying the sharp edge of urgency. I'm calling from the Financial Chronicle. Can you confirm whether the $1.8 billion contract is frozen due to ethics concerns? For a second, I let silence stretch, long enough for her to know I'd heard. long enough to make her lean forward in her chair. Then I said, "Calm and clean as a scalpel. Read the clauses." A sharp inhale on the other end. And then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, a slow smile curling at the edges. Those 3 words would burn through headlines before lunch. Not because they revealed everything, but because they revealed just enough to make people hungry for more. And hunger drives panic. Within an hour, my prediction came true. The Chronicle ran with a new headline: "Exclusive. Insider points to ethics clause in Brightwell's frozen deal." The investor channel exploded, messages pouring in like floodwater. "Grant needs to speak now. If this isn't resolved by EOD, we pull." Every word was another pound of pressure tightening around Lucas's throat. Meanwhile, my inbox was a battlefield. 5 messages from Grant, 7 from Lucas, all with escalating subject lines. "Need to discuss." "Call me now." "This is spiraling. Let's be reasonable." Reasonable. That word tasted like smoke in my mouth. Was it reasonable when he stripped me bare in front of the entire company? When he turned my integrity into a punchline? I closed the emails without opening them, let them sweat, because pressure was no longer mine to carry. It was theirs. And it was growing, loud, visible, unstoppable. Across the room, the television flickered with a live segment, a panel dissecting Brightwell's sudden stumble. One analyst leaned forward, voice sharp with certainty. "When a deal of this magnitude freezes, it's never just a technicality. Something's rotting in that house." I muted the TV and reached for my coffee, letting the words sink into the quiet like a hymn. Something's rotting. All right. And for the first time, everyone could smell it. The call came just past midnight, slicing through the quiet like a blade. I stared at the glowing screen. Grant Reynolds, the CEO himself, the man who'd built Brightwell's empire brick by brick, or so he liked to remind everyone. For 3 beats, I let it ring, not out of hesitation, but to make sure when I answered. The silence cut him first. "Grant." My voice was calm, low, almost bored. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice detonated in my ear, raw and unpolished, the mask stripped off. No charm, no boardroom composure, just rage clawing its way out. "I'm drinking tea," I said evenly, staring at the city lights beyond my window. "Why?" "Don't play smart with me," he snapped. "This circus you've started, it ends tonight." "Circus?" I let the word linger, slow and deliberate. "Interesting choice. Don't test me. Your name." His tone tightened, dropping to something that tried to sound controlled, but shook at the edges. "Sign the ethics clearance, and I'll make your severance double. Hell, triple. You walk away with a golden parachute. No questions asked." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I let silence do the talking until he filled it with desperation. "You think this stunt hurts me?" His voice cracked like a whip. "It hurts the company you claim to care about, the people you worked with for a decade, their jobs, their futures. Do you even get that?" There it was, the pivot to morality, wielded like a blunt weapon. I pictured him pacing a mahogany office, tie loosened, veins pulsing in his temple. Grant Reynolds, master strategist, king of optics, reduced to begging on a midnight call. "My signature isn't for sale," I said finally. Each word carved in ice, a breath on the line, sharp and ragged. "Careful," he hissed. "You're playing a game you can't win." "Funny," I replied softly. "I was thinking the same thing about you." Click. The call died in a sterile beep, leaving the room steeped in silence. For a moment, I stared at the black screen, my reflection faint against the glass. No tremor in my hands, no second guessing, just a stillness that felt like steel settling into place. Then my laptop chimed. A new email slid into view, its subject line crisp and commanding. Invitation. Emergency board session, 8:30 a.m. Role. Independent Ethics Authority. I read it twice, then a third time, not because I doubted, but because the symmetry of it all tasted too sharp to swallow in one bite. Hours ago, Lucas had thrown me out of Brightwell like trash. Now the board wanted me back, not as an employee, not as a subordinate, but as the one voice that could decide whether the company lived or bled out. I clicked the details. Video conference with the board, the trust fund, and top-tier investors. The subject line didn't scream desperation, but the urgency bled through every pixel. They needed me in that seat because without me, the $1.8 billion deal remained a corpse on the table. My eyes drifted to the city beyond the glass, steel towers, burning lights, the pulse of power humming under midnight fog. A place built for kings, now cracking at its foundation. Grant thought he could buy me. That money could plaster over betrayal. That I'd trade integrity for a severance check like a dog chasing scraps. But I'd learned something tonight. Men like Grant mistake compliance for weakness. They confuse silence with surrender. Tomorrow, they'd learn the truth. By the time the clock hit 8:30 a.m., the video conference was live, and the screen felt hotter than any spotlight. Faces filled the grid, board members, trust fund representatives, institutional investors, people who could move markets with a single sentence. And then there was me, in the smallest square, yet holding the sharpest blade in the room. "Thank you for joining, everyone," Grant began, his voice dressed in calm that didn't fit. I could almost hear the effort it took to smooth out the edges. "Let's clear the air about these recent disruptions." Disruptions. He made it sound like a hiccup, not the implosion of a $1.8 billion contract. Lucas sat to his right, jaw tight, tie knotted like a noose. His eyes kept darting, not at me, never at me, but to the chat window flickering on his screen. He was waiting for someone to save him. No one would. "Before we continue," said a voice I recognized from the investor channel. Cool and surgical. "We need one fact confirmed. Is the ethics clearance pending or not?" Grant smiled. Too wide. "Routine procedure," he said. "All in motion. No cause for alarm." That was when another voice cut in, flat and merciless. "If she doesn't sign, this deal dies. We all know the clause." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded. Every eye turned toward me. The name they tried to bury, now glowing like a warning flare. Grant cleared his throat. "We're aligned here," he said quickly, like words could dam a flood. "She understands the stakes." "Do I?" I let the pause stretch until tension hissed through the connection. Then I leaned forward, my tone low, steady. "I understand perfectly." Lucas shifted, a flicker of red climbing his neck. "This isn't necessary," he snapped, his voice cracking through the mic. "We're talking about a timing issue, not a crisis." "Timing?" I repeated softly, like tasting the word before spitting it out. "That's an interesting way to frame fraud." That landed like shrapnel. Faces stiffened, someone muted, then unmuted too fast, panic bleeding through digital cracks. The chairwoman of the board adjusted her glasses. Voice sharp. "Is this about the $600 million discrepancy we saw rumored in last night's reports?" I watched Grant's smile falter, watched Lucas glance down like the answer might be hiding in his lap. No one spoke. The silence screamed. "Yes," I said. One word. Clean. Undeniable. It sliced through the meeting like a cold wind. And for the first time since this began. The power tilted, not in whispers, not in shadows, but right here, in front of everyone who mattered. The chat box exploded with messages. Explain. Details. Audit now. Pressure detonated on their side. While I sat still, the calm center of a storm I created, Grant tried to recover, voice brittle. "We don't air speculation in front of investors. This isn't speculation," I cut in. And my voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Authority isn't volume, it's gravity. And in that moment, Every ounce of it belonged to me. The chairwoman raised a hand. Enough posturing. Your name. Submit your findings. Full transparency. Until then, the deal stays frozen. Lucas's face drained, lips parting like he might argue, then closing when he saw no lifeline coming. And just like that, the tables weren't just turned, they were bolted to the floor in my favor. I ended the call with no flourish, just a click that felt heavier than applause. My reflection stared back from the black screen, calm, composed, carrying a power I didn't steal but reclaimed. Tomorrow, they'd scramble harder. And I'd be ready. The email landed like a blade on my desk at 10:42 a.m. Subject: Allegation of misconduct. Immediate response required. From Trust Fund Compliance. I opened it, pulse steady at first, then tightening with every line I read. It has come to our attention that you may have attempted to delay the execution of Brightwell's strategic contract for personal benefit. Please submit clarifying documentation within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in review of your authority status. For a moment, the screen blurred. Not because the words were unclear, they were surgical in intent, but because they carried a weight designed to crush. Personal benefit, delay for gain. Lucas's fingerprints were all over this. The bastard had moved fast, faster than I anticipated. My jaw locked as I scrolled down, scanning the attached evidence. Screenshots of emails stripped of context, spliced together to make me look like a saboteur. Conversations about compliance flagged as stall tactics. Notes I wrote months ago, now weaponized against me. Lucas wasn't swinging wildly anymore. He was playing chess, and he'd just advanced his queen. The room felt smaller, the silence heavier. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms to my eyes, drawing in a breath sharp enough to burn. This was the moment the story could flip, not in headlines, but in truth. Because power built on perception is fragile, and Lucas knew how to fracture it. My phone buzzed. Another email, same sender, one line, bold and merciless. Deadline, 24 hours. Doubt crept in like smoke, thin and poisonous. What if they believed him? What if this entire edifice I built, my leverage, my quiet revenge, collapsed under a lie that sounded cleaner than the truth? I pushed the thought out, hard, and forced my hands to move. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. Facts were my currency. Receipts were my armor. And I had one piece Lucas could never erase. The recording. I dug through my files, fingers flying, until the audio file glowed on my screen like a lifeline. Grant Reynolds, call 12:43 a.m. .mp3. I hit play, letting the venom spill into the quiet. Grant, sign the ethics clearance, and I'll make your severance double, triple. Whatever it takes. My voice, cold as steel. My signature isn't for sale. That was it. No ambiguity, no loophole, a bribe, caught in digital amber. I attached the file to my reply, adding only one sentence above it. This is the only offer I've ever entertained, and refused. My cursor hovered over send for a breath that felt endless, then clicked. The whoosh sounded softer than I expected, almost fragile against the weight pressing down on me. Minutes crawled by, thick with silence. Then my inbox chimed. Trust Fund Compliance. Received. Will review. 3 words, flat, bloodless. No comfort, no condemnation. Just a verdict postponed. Dangling like a sword above my head, I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The taste of copper sharp on my tongue. Doubt clawed at the edges of my calm. What if this wasn't enough? What if Lucas spun another thread? Pulled another string? The clock on the wall ticked louder than the city outside, each second dragging like an iron chain. For the first time since this began. The power didn't feel absolute. It felt conditional, fragile, like glass balanced on a wire. And somewhere in the distance, behind boardroom doors, Inside investor channels, Lucas was smiling, believing he'd finally found a crack in my armor. Maybe he had, or maybe he'd just handed me the blade I needed to finish this war. But tonight, I wouldn't sleep, not because of fear, but because tension like this demands preparation. If tomorrow came with a verdict, I'd be ready, with fire or with silence, whichever cut deepest. By 7:02 a.m., the city outside my window was still yawning awake, but I had already been at war for hours. No panic, no hesitation, just the rhythmic click of keys as I assembled the weapon they never saw coming, a report that would gut their empire without a single raised voice. 132 pages. Every number bled truth. Every chart was a mirror they'd prayed no one would hold up. Fraud doesn't vanish when you hide it behind bonuses and glossy investor decks. It festers. And this report dragged it into the light. $600 million. That's what they buried. Ghost invoices, inflated procurement chains, shell vendors linked to Lucas's private LLC. I didn't just trace the smoke. I found the fire, mapped its spread, and packaged it with timestamps, email threads, and signed approvals that carried Grant Reynolds' name like fingerprints on a knife. The section headers read like charges: unauthorized diversions, conflict of interest, fabricated vendor trails, under each. Exhibits lined up like soldiers, screenshots, wire records, internal memos. And then the crown jewel, the audio file of Grant's midnight bribe. I embedded it on page 74 with one caption: attempted obstruction, cold work, surgical work, the kind that doesn't tremble or apologize. By 9:15 a.m., the report was live, uploaded to the secure compliance portal with distribution tags that guaranteed visibility. Board of directors, trust fund oversight, primary investors. No leaks, no media yet. Just the people with power to burn Brightwell to its foundations. I sat back, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat against the confirmation screen. Submission complete. For the first time in days. The knot in my chest loosened, not into relief, but into something sharper. Control wasn't enough anymore. This was about consequence. The first reply landed 23 minutes later. Not from Grant, not from Lucas. From the trust fund's chief compliance officer. Subject: review underway. Immediate session scheduled. Body: board convening at 10:30 a.m. Prepare to elaborate findings. I skimmed the words, calm settling over me like frost. They didn't ask if my report was accurate. They didn't posture or placate. They moved. That told me everything. The ground was cracking under Grant's feet, and Lucas's empire of entitlement was about to collapse with it. My phone vibrated again. This time, a second email layered over the first like a dagger driven deeper. From Trust Fund Executive Council. Subject: leadership review. Body: replace leadership or we pull funding. 6 words, and a kingdom fell. I stared at the line, letting its weight fill the room. This wasn't negotiation. It was an ultimatum etched in steel, the kind that doesn't leave room for apologies or second chances. I pictured the boardroom when this hit their inbox, the chaos humming under polished suits, voices cracking against marble walls. Lucas would fight. Of course. Grant would roar. But noise doesn't stop gravity, and the pull was already in motion. I forwarded nothing, called no one. Silence was still my sharpest blade. Let them scramble in the dark while I sat here, steady as bedrock, watching the avalanche I engineered gather speed. Across the apartment, the TV murmured with market news. Brightwell stock had bled another 5% since sunrise. Analysts' voices sharpening into doubt. Phrases like governance crisis and executive credibility in question crawled across the ticker. They didn't know the half of it, but they would. I glanced at the clock. 10:24 a.m. now. 6 minutes until the board call. 6 minutes until Grant and his golden boy walked into a firing squad made of numbers. ethics, and the fine print they thought no one remembered. My reflection in the dark screen looked almost serene. Not triumphant, not smug, just precise. Because this was never about revenge dressed in fire. It was about justice delivered in ice. And in 6 minutes, the freeze would become a fracture, then a collapse, then silence. By 10:30 a.m., the boardroom felt like a pressure chamber. The air wasn't moving. It was vibrating. 12 faces filled the video grid, their expressions carved from stone, their eyes sharp with calculation. At the head of the table, Grant was already unraveling, his voice ricocheting off polished walls like a gunshot. "She's sabotaging us!" he roared, fist slamming the table hard enough to make the water glasses jump. "This entire circus, these so-called ethics concerns, they're fabricated, malicious!" His rage wasn't a flare anymore. It was wildfire, devouring what little credibility he had left. I sat in silence, spine straight, watching him burn. Across from him, Lucas tried to play the part of calm strategist, his voice low, his smile strained like stretched wire. "Let's not sensationalize this. The delay is temporary. We have contingencies in place." "Contingencies?" A voice cut through, cool and surgical. It belonged to Morrison, the lead investor from the trust fund, the man whose capital kept Brightwell breathing. His tone could have frozen oceans. "The only contingency here is survival, and right now, your leadership is the liability." Lucas opened his mouth, but Morrison didn't give him the oxygen. "We reviewed the report, 600 million unaccounted for, shell entities tied to private accounts, and then this." He tapped the tablet in front of him, its screen reflecting the glow of my report. "An audio file where your father offers a bribe to suppress it." Grant lunged forward, face crimson. "That was taken out of context. You think I'd compromise my company for—" "The sabotage was yours," Morrison said flatly, slicing through his roar like a scalpel. "Yours, Grant, and your son's." Silence detonated across the room, not loud, but absolute, like air sucked from a vacuum. For the first time, Grant faltered. His mouth opened, then closed, the fight draining from his eyes as if someone had pulled the plug on his fury. Lucas shifted in his chair, knuckles whitening against polished oak. This is a misunderstanding, a personal vendetta. His finger jabbed toward the screen where my face hovered, calm as still water. "She engineered this because we terminated her employment." I leaned forward, voice low, even. "You terminated me because I refused to bury fraud." No one spoke. No one had to. The weight of that sentence settled like iron dust, coating every polished surface in truth. The chairwoman of the board cleared her throat, her tone sharp enough to draw blood. "Enough. We are not here to debate character assassinations. We are here to decide the future of this company." She turned to the panel, eyes sweeping like a blade. "Motion to remove Grant Reynolds as Chief Executive Officer and Lucas Reynolds as Vice President. Effective immediately. All in favor?" Hands rose like guillotines, one after another, without hesitation. Morrison's, Patel's, Liu's, then every remaining square on the grid, unanimous and brutal in its clarity. The chairwoman nodded once, crisp and final. Motion carried. Just like that. The empire they built on arrogance and shadow deals collapsed, not with fire, not with spectacle, but with the soft click of a gavel and 12 raised hands. Grant sagged back in his chair, color draining from his face. The fight gone. Lucas sat frozen, a man who'd never tasted consequence choking on its first bitter sip. For a flicker of a second, his eyes met mine, wide, wild, and desperate. I held his gaze, calm as glass, controlled detonation. That's what this was. Not rage, not noise. Precision charges placed in silence. timed to collapse everything at once. And now, as dust settled over the ruins of their reign, I felt no triumph, just inevitability. The chairwoman's voice broke through, even and cold. We'll reconvene in 15 minutes to discuss interim leadership. Meeting adjourned. The screen blinked black. My reflection stared back. Expression steady. Heart a metronome. This wasn't the end. It was the threshold. And on the other side waited something heavier than revenge. Power. The silence after the vote wasn't empty. It was alive, humming like a high-tension wire. My screen reflected a gallery of faces, some tight with fatigue, others slack with disbelief. And then the chairwoman's voice sliced through the quiet, calm and merciless as a scalpel. Effective immediately. Grant Reynolds and Lucas Reynolds are removed from their positions. I exhaled, not in relief, but in acknowledgement. The collapse was complete. Every move I made, the clauses, the freeze, the report, had led to this precise moment. And yet, what came next felt heavier than anything before. The chairwoman adjusted her glasses, her gaze zeroing in on me. Now, she said, her tone as measured as the swing of a pendulum. We need leadership, someone the trust fund will endorse, someone who holds the key. The key. My authority wasn't just a procedural lock anymore. It was the artery keeping this company alive. Without my signature, the $1.8 billion deal remained frozen, and the clock was eating into investor patience by the second. You hold the key, she continued. Will you lead? For a breath. The room stilled. The weight of her question pressed down, sharp and undeniable. I thought of the woman they humiliated in that glass conference room, the one whose name became a joke in the company chat. That woman was gone. What sat here now was something colder, harder, carved from fire and silence. Yes, I said finally, voice steady as steel. But on my terms. Brows arched. Morrison, the trust fund's lead investor, leaned forward slightly. State them. I straightened, every syllable honed like a blade. Full implementation of the transparency protocols I designed last year, the ones Grant shelved because he said they'd slow things down. Quarterly audits overseen by independent compliance, no discretionary bonuses tied to undisclosed metrics, non-negotiable. A ripple of murmurs moved across the grid. The board members weren't used to demands, not from someone outside their circle, not from someone they'd tried to erase. The chairwoman's voice carried a note of challenge. Those measures will change operational dynamics significantly. That's the point, I replied, my tone cold but calm. You asked me to lead. I won't inherit rot and call it structure. For a beat, silence held court. Then Morrison spoke, his words slicing through the static. Approved. Just like that. No hesitation, no drawn-out debate. The man who controlled the lifeline of capital had made his move, and the rest would follow because money bends spines faster than morality ever could. The chairwoman nodded slowly. Then it's settled. She met my eyes, her expression unreadable, but edged with something that almost resembled respect. Draft your terms. We'll execute them alongside the leadership transition. I inclined my head once, crisp and final. I'll send the document within the hour. As the meeting dissolved into logistics, voices overlapping about interim appointments and investor calls, I muted the audio and sat back. My reflection stared at me from the black border of the screen. Not triumphant. Not even smiling, just steady. Vindication isn't loud. It doesn't dance on ruins. It sits quietly, like frost on glass, letting the weight of justice settle. I glanced at the clock. 11:50 a.m. now. In less than an hour. I'd gone from being the company's scapegoat to its axis. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither was the cost. Every choice I made carved away something I once believed about fairness, about loyalty, But what replaced it wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. The chat window blinked one last time before I logged off. A single message from Morrison. "Welcome to the helm. Don't let them forget why you're there." I closed the laptop slowly, the hum of power thrumming in my ears. This wasn't the end. This was the threshold, the line between surviving their world and remaking it in my image. And the first stroke of that image would be written in black ink across a contract worth $1.8 billion. 1 month later, the elevator doors opened with a whisper, and I stepped into a hallway I used to walk as an employee. Today, it belonged to me. The plaque on the frosted glass door gleamed under the morning light. The letters sharp and unapologetic. Chief Executive Officer, my name. I let my fingertips brush the edge of the door before pushing it open. The office smelled the same, polished wood and faint espresso, but the air felt different, lighter, as if it had been waiting for this shift all along. The desk stood at the center like a throne carved from steel and glass, and on it, laid open like a promise fulfilled, was the contract that had sparked the war. Strategic investment agreement. 1.8 billion, my signature stretched across the bottom in ink as dark as midnight. The letters calm, deliberate, owning every curve. The deal that once chained this company to chaos now sat under my control. A symbol not of greed, but of reclamation. I circled the desk slowly, running my hand along its edge, feeling the weight of what it represented. Not just a title, not just a chair. This was proof that silence doesn't mean surrender. That integrity can cut deeper than power plays and family names. The city sprawled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a grid of light and motion, oblivious to the war fought behind this glass. A month ago, they paraded me out as a liability. Today, I returned as the axis on which their survival turned. I sank into the chair, Grant's chair once, now stripped of his ghosts, and opened the laptop. Notifications bloomed across the screen. Investor updates, compliance reports, onboarding for my transparency protocols, the architecture of a new era taking shape under my command. Then, in the corner of the screen, an email popped up like a whisper from the past. From Lucas Reynolds. Subject, no subject body, you win. 2 words, no punctuation, no attempt at bravado, just resignation bleeding through pixels. For a moment, I stared at it, the memory of his smirk in that conference room flickering like a dying flame. The man who laughed as he tore me down, now reduced to this, a digital white flag. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Victory doesn't shout, it hums. Quiet and absolute. Instead, I closed the laptop gently, letting the click echo like the final note of a long, brutal symphony. My eyes drifted back to the contract, then to the skyline shimmering beyond the glass. Triumph didn't taste sweet. It tasted clean, like air after a storm. Liberation isn't loud. It's the stillness that comes when every chain has turned to dust. I thought of that day, of the slide glowing with proof, of laughter in the company chat, of my mother's text about a house we almost lost. And I thought of this day, of the arc between humiliation and command, drawn not by luck, but by precision and resolve. This wasn't revenge, not anymore. This was reclamation of name, of voice, of power. I stood, crossing to the window, the city lights pooling at my feet like molten gold, for the first time in years. The horizon didn't feel like a wall, it felt like an open door. Behind me, the plaque caught the light again, throwing my name across the glass, a name they tried to erase, now etched deeper than ever. I smiled, not wide, not cruel, just enough to feel the weight lift, enough to taste the quiet promise in the air, whatever came next. I wouldn't just survive it, I'd shape it, and somewhere in the inbox of a man who thought power was his birthright, my silence would echo louder than any reply. I've learned something through this journey, Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. When they pushed me down, I didn't break, I built. I turned humiliation into leverage and turned leverage into leadership. That's what this story is really about: owning your voice when others try to erase it, and proving that integrity outlasts arrogance every single time. If this story resonated with you, let me know in the comments. Tell me what you'd have done in my place. Your thoughts matter here. And if you believe stories like this can inspire someone else, hit that like button and share this video with a friend who needs it today. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about resilience, justice, and quiet power. Because trust me, the next one will be even more shocking.